Good evening, this is the Oscar expert here with Brother Bro. We're going to talk about Old, the newest M. Night Shyamalan film. This is a thriller about a group of people who are on vacation who get trapped on a secluded beach where they begin to age rapidly. Since you've already had the chance to see the movie, we're going to give a quick take on what we thought about it with no spoilers, but we really just want to talk about more of the ending. I thought this was an unsettling and very creepy thriller, but the script didn't really elevate the material beyond the thrills. The third act kind of went downhill for me, but I will truly remember the cinematography, which I thought was remarkable. It was very unconventional. They didn't go for the traditional way to cover scenes, and it just kept me kind of glued to the screen and maybe appreciate it as a thriller. I agree, some of the bolder choices with the cinematography and the directing were keeping me engaged. I also did like that I never really knew where the original premise was going to go, so I was always wanting to watch and see what will happen next. I don't think the movie was so much scary as it was distressing, and when things happened that were bad, it was just like, oh. But what kept the experience from being as intense as I think I wanted it to be is just that the writing was a little awkward. Just the dialogue and like the choices that the characters made, it just felt a little off. That's such a taste thing too. Like, some people won't mind that the dialogue's off because they'll read it as a B movie. I don't think it's definitively a B movie though. I think it's somewhere in between, or maybe even unintentionally comes across as like a B movie or a little bit cheesy. Also, being on the beach, I would be like, if I don't act fast, I will miss out on so much of my life. And that urgency, it wasn't always there. So I was kind of like, aren't these characters like gonna act a little?
What were they gonna do?
I just thought they were gonna be a little more like shit.
They can't run into the cave though, because they go.
Well, I know that they figured out all the things, but I don't know. I'm just
visually, this was very well approached. Story-wise, character-wise, definitely would have liked to see more. Into spoiler territory, let's just dig in to what we thought about the ending, because we had a nice hearty debate about this.
Spoilers are coming. Get away if you haven't seen the movie, if you want to see the movie. Leave. This is for the cool kids club who have seen the movie.
In the end, it's revealed that the reason the island is making people old is because they're in some sort of magnetic field simulated by these scientists who are performing longitudinal studies on these unsuspecting guests for pharmaceutical drugs in order to test their effects more quickly and get the results out to the public, therefore saving more lives. Essentially, if you can test a drug and then it's successful for cancer treatment and you didn't have to wait 60 years to do it, then you would save all these people that would die in that 60-year period of time. If they did that in real life and it definitely worked, we'd have to talk about like whether that would be worth it.
It definitely asks you an interesting question about like whether or not that is a dilemma that you would be okay with. I almost sympathized a little bit with it because I was like, oh, if you're literally saving hundreds of thousands of lives as you claim, then maybe I'm like a little bit okay with it, even though it's obviously an ethical dilemma.
Or do you want to talk about the ethics of this? I thought about it. So there's literally been medical experimentation in the United States, which have been sponsored by organizations like the U.S. Public Health Service. Recorded incidences of this date back to slavery, but they've been continuing since into like the 60s, where there have been incidences with medical experimentation on impoverished black people or people with diseases or people in prisons. The country I live in has a pretty ugly history of this, and in all cases, this has been extremely wrong. It was done without people's consent, and you know, the other like impact of this is that it erodes trust in public health institutions, which we are feeling the effects of today. There's all kinds of questions about what happens psychologically to the people who live in a society where it's permissible to unwittingly be experimented on for medical purposes.
Yeah, but the point in this movie is that nobody else would ever know.
Yeah, but if you're a true utilitarian, then you take the odds of what are the chances that people actually do find out. There's always some sort of chance, even if it's small, that people find out eventually. Society as a whole wouldn't really be able to consent to this, and if you went around and surveyed people, like, they would probably say, no, I would like my right to not be experimented on.
It's a violation of
They would
rights.
trade that off for the potential benefit of what the medicine does, and that probably therefore would make it impermissible from an ethical standpoint.
If the movie's trying to have a stance on that, which we'll get into next, I mean, that's what it's taking, is that it's still a violation of their rights because they go and they arrest them all and it's yay, yay, yay.
If you're going to go the sci-fi route and you do want to explain away the plot, this is a decent explanation because, again, medical experimentation is a real thing.
I thought it was a decent explanation for why the island was doing it, but at the same time, the conversation we just had, like, Is that the takeaway of the movie? There's nothing else in the movie that's about that. And so the twist in some ways feels a little bit like just separate. It's a separate, cool explanation, but it didn't build on the movie.
No, I mean, the movie is not about like utilitarian ethics versus like people's rights, their freedoms and their rights. Did this movie need to explain itself is my question. And I've said before when reviewing horror films, like, I don't need horror films to explain away the things that have happened. I like when they're surreal. Dreams are terrifying and dreams are unexplained. You just wake up and you're like, oh, that was fucking awful, and you know, I'm glad that that's not the reality that I live in. Why can't movies just be the same way? I thought even Hereditary, like, the best parts about the movie were that you didn't know like what was real or not, or whether there was psychological elements at play, or whether this was really a situation that was controlled by these outside forces. And I was disappointed to learn that the characters didn't really have like free will in this situation. They were being controlled by outside forces. There's nothing really left to the imagination, even though Hereditary is like one of my favorite horror movies easily. I don't like when horror movies explain themselves. So my preference for this film would have been that everybody just dies on the beach. And you have sort of feelings about that, but I can keep defending myself.
I just think that if everybody died on the beach, the movie would have to have done more for me to think that that was a good way to end it, because if it went the way it did and then everybody died, I'd be like, cool, that's bleak. What do I do with that? Goodbye.
Even given that, like, this was a Shyamalan movie and I knew that it was going to go there, it just strongly suggested there would be an explanation by the end. Even given what I was promised, if it ended the way that I kind of wanted it to, where they just like are there and they just sort of die and they build a sandcastle, and then like the sandcastle becomes sort of like a metaphor for life, where like the tide just takes it in and just flattens it again. I would have actually liked that. I've been like, okay, that I leave the theater holding on to that, like, damn, you know?
There were a couple moments. One of them was with the sandcastle, and the other was the conflict between Vicky Krieps and Gael Garcia Bernal, where this movie was maybe going for actually something a little bit deeper. So Vicky Krieps' character, we find out, was dying of cancer. She realizes that she doesn't have enough time, and she cheats on him because she doesn't know what else to do with her life. And then later, Gael Garcia Bernal ends up forgiving her for this, because as time goes on, it just seems little to him. So in Vicky Krieps' world, there's actually, even before she gets on the beach, the stakes of time running out. So I liked that a lot. I thought that was the one conflict in the movie that actually seemed to matter. And then there was the moment where they built the sandcastle, which was like, even though time is passing us by, we are going to like sit here and just like do a fun
I thought that
thing.
was a strong choice for the characters to make.
So there are occasional moments where maybe there's something that the movie's trying to say about the passage of time. The reason that I don't think this is a great ending is because it doesn't build on that, and it doesn't build on very much that happened in the movie. I think a lot of twist endings, they just draw attention to how cool the twist is and how I didn't see that coming. And you leave the theater thinking about, that was a weird twist and I didn't see it coming, but you're not thinking about some of the conflicts that were presented to you before the twist. The horrors of aging rapidly and seeing your life fly by. Those things are not that concerning at the end of the movie, especially because of how tidy it is. Like, like the lab is not going to exist anymore. Nobody's going to be experimented on. Nobody is going to go to the beach again, and we're just done with that, you know? So we're not left chewing on any of the things that maybe the movie was setting up. And I don't feel that way about the ending of The Sixth Sense, for example. That actually added like another emotional layer to the movie. It added something about Bruce Willis's character. I feel like most twists almost function to be like, isn't that an impressive twist? You didn't see that coming. And then you're just like, oh yes, the twist was very twisty. But a twist that builds on the movie, that builds with the characters, is the best kind of twist in my opinion. And I think Arrival is my favorite kind of twist for that reason. It really adds a new layer to the movie without seeming like it's trying to draw attention to how cool the twist is.
The only function of the twist, or really I'll just say the explanation, because it's not even really a twist. The twist would be like if I thought something was one way and then it turned out that it was actually another way, and everything that happened before could have been seen through a different lens. This was just an explanation for what occurred. And the function of that is just closure, which is something that most audience members appreciate. And they'll also like the fact that they escaped this dreadful place, because the movie really does like put you through the ringer on like all of these awful things happening. So at least you can have that little semblance of happiness at the end, but it doesn't really advance any of the themes. Another problem I have with the explanation was the choral didn't make much sense to me. It was an odd way out that, was very convenient. It was like the convenience that would set them free in the end.
Also-
and also they held their breath for like 20 minutes. You cannot ask me to watch a character hold their breath for more than a minute without me like being bothered by it, because I want them to breathe so bad. Like,
Yeah.
I refuse to suspend my disbelief about that. I can literally believe that the scientists are medically experimenting on them with some sort of mineral technology that ages them before I can believe that they can hold their breath for 3 minutes.
Also, they were swimming towards the coral, and then before they went in the cave, they should have been like,
They should
okay,
have
there's the
taken a
cave.
fucking
I'm
breath.
gonna come up for breath, then I'm gonna go in the cave. Like it was like, oh,
And they had a really hard time getting that sweater off. Like, it was too hard.
and then after they got it off, they should have just taken off their coats. 'Cause
They should have taken
obviously
off
they
their
don't want that
clothes
to happen again.
like before they got in the water. Anyway, I agree that like the way the film was going, we expected an explanation and we had to get one. Like, it kind of pains me to say it because I love like when things are not explained. But I do think there is another film out there, in the ether that could have worked, that didn't have to explain itself, because it could set you up for the payoff being like this sort of meditation or exploration of existentialism. The movie kind of tacks on some themes that I actually think could have been really well done in another film. Like, they acknowledge that they're on this beautiful beach whilst their bodies are decaying and becoming so ugly. I don't think it was poignant in the movie, but in a sense it is when you think about like your relationship to the world. Like, you're just this thing that gets old and has like bodily horrors, and you have like cognitive decay, and you watch people around you deteriorate, but ultimately like you're just on this like beautiful beach, and that is sustaining like longer than your body is, and you're gonna like disintegrate into a part of it. There was this insistence from the beginning that some kind of tie-in to like being in the moment was gonna happen, like right from the fucking start in the car, where she was like, just be in the moment about or something like that. And I was like, yeah, it's gonna go for a being in the moment thing. There was an argument where she was like, you're living in the future, and he was like, you're living in the past.
Are we
It
gonna
was
get
obvious.
into every single bit of dialogue that was weird now? Because I can't do that.
We can't go through all that now.
There were 2 points where they touched on the thing that you're saying. One is where they built the sandcastle, and the other is when Gael Garcia Bernal was dying, and he said,
Yeah.
I forget why we're on the beach, but it's so beautiful. Why were we trying to leave? I forget.
Did kind of love that scene though. I did really like that scene and the shot. I actually overall liked the movie because of how evocative the shots and the scenes were, and like how they were made. You're holding on that shot and it's this beautiful moment, and then suddenly like the character drops and it's like the tone just shifts, but the camera doesn't even move. Also, just to point out, the graphic novel it's based on, Sandcastle, does have them just like there's one person on the beach at the end. They just, like make a little sandcastle and then it's over.
That would have been more evocative.
Yeah, I mean, the graphic novel is very different, but again, like, yes, it would have been more evocative, and it was there. Like, that was the original ending, but of course, M. Night Shyamalan did his own thing with it.
We also have to talk about his own giving himself a cameo here. I was not that much of a fan of it because it was a little distracting. It wasn't that he was necessarily bad.
He wasn't bad. It was just distracting.
It was distracting, and there was something going on where it was like M. Night Shyamalan was filming the characters, so it almost alluded to, oh, this is a meta thing because it's about how the filmmaker himself manipulates his subjects, but it's also just not a movie that's about that.
It was too grand of an idea to bring in just for like a little cheekiness. For him to be looking down the lens, like right at you. It would have been like neat or clever, but it was like a weird Lego movie moment in a film that just had nothing to do with that whatsoever.
And then you get into the lab and the names of people, the cinematographer, and I assume other people
I don't care
in
about
the
that.
crew like was also there. So it seemed like it was building on like the whole like meta people are in the movie.
Oh, I see what you're saying. But it wasn't.
I know, but it was for no reason.
It was for no reason. I will literally defend like 30% of the writing in this movie. Like, the majority of it I don't think was particularly well done. But visually, I would defend like 90% of this film. There were like some weird dollying crash zooms that were very disorienting that I didn't quite understand because they didn't even like have context. But overall, I was really happy to see a film approach like this. Like, for example, I just remember the giving birth scene. It was like a Paul Thomas Anderson like dolly in on that, and then it just like went across the whole beach exploring different characters' reactions. Some people feel like it was pulling you away from that, but I liked how often we were taken away from what was happening, or that the film was withholding information from you.
I did like the long takes where it would like pan away and you'd be like staring at the ocean for a couple seconds. It's kind of like eerie.
And I also want to point out that they made it look great despite it being like middle of the day lighting where the sun's like beaming over their heads.
I thought it was dumb when the blonde woman was like, her bones were breaking, but like for some reason she was like chasing them. I just didn't know why she was like coming at them like, I'm gonna get you. Also the thing where the character's like, what's the movie with Jack Nicholson and Marlon Brando? I looked it up. And I can't think of a way that would tie in or be like some Easter egg. Like, I thought like if you look it up, it'd be like, oh, cool. Like that's, oh, I see how that's related
like
to the movie,
paying
but
homage.
it really doesn't feel like it is. And those are thoughts on Old and thoughts on twist endings and if this one is a good one.
For the record, I'd give this a 7 out of 10, which is probably shocking.
I
But
thought it was
liked
for the
it.
writing being that. I'm very between like a 5 and a 6. I might say a 6 just because like I'm like kind of okay with the fact that I saw the movie. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. When will you be old?